We're going to kick off a brand new series of messages today, and it's going to be one that I think is going to speak to the church in big ways. And it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. And, and listen, here's my question to you in starting out. How do you hold on when life isn't okay? When you're experiencing anxiety, when you're having financial problems, when you're going through the biggest struggles of your life, and there's fear, and there's doubt, and there's confusion. Listen, as a believer, how do you hold on when life isn't okay? Come on, let's face it. Sometimes it's just not okay, and when we look at that, and so what I want to do today is I'm going to attempt to preach through the entire book of Job in one message, and so we're going to have to hit the ground running and understand we're going to hit it fast and furious. But I want to look at maybe the best possible place that we could look at this story in the story of Job. And let's just read the first chapter of Job. It says this. It says, "In the land of Uz there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and he shunned evil. And he had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants." I mean, he was a rich dude. It says he was the greatest man among all the people in the East. His sons used to hold feasts in their homes and on their birthdays, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them. And when a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." And this was Job's regular custom. Now, it starts off, verse 1 just says, "In the land of Uz there lived a man whose name was Job." Nobody really knows where Uz was, except we know it was in the east. And you might remember when Adam and Eve were kicked out and banished from the Garden of Eden, that they settled east of Eden. And so you can even write this down. East of Eden in the Bible became a picture, if you will, of where life is broken. I think many of us understand where that is, but where life is broken. And so in the beginning of this story, it's all good, right? We find Job's a pious guy. He's a righteous guy. He's got everything going on well for him. And he's so cautious about his faith. This passage says that he even offers sacrifices for his children just in case they sinned, right? Just in case. I mean, that's kind of going over the top. Maybe they sinned, possibly. And so God gives Job this wonderful life, and he's a model for everybody else. He's the greatest in his area. He was the greatest one that was in the East. And Uz is a place, when we talk about it, listen, it becomes symbolic of a place where really, really bad things happen to a good man. I mean, Uz was the place where not just suffering came, but it came without warning, without preparation. And here Job found himself in the midst of it. And listen, the worst part is God was not there in the midst of it. He wasn't there. And Uz is the place where it's not okay. Anybody ever dwelled there in a place that's not okay? That's what Uz represents. And everybody that's in the room, we might as well become aware that we're going to become very aware that listen, Uz happens to us. You know, sometimes life isn't okay. You know, I think of conversations that I've had this week of people that have walked through divorce. They're having financial struggles, that are going through health issues, that are just stress and anxiety. Some of you, it's depression. Uz is the land of the not okay. And so in this story, I want you to understand the writer kind of sets it up almost like it's 2 plays going on. There's an upper stage and there's a lower stage. So I want you to get it in your mind. 2 different stages, 2 different acts that are taking place. One, the upper stage, that's in heaven. That's where this is unfolding. And the lower stage is down here on earth, and it's where that is taking place. And so to us, the reader, when we read the book of Job, we see both stages at the same time. We see both upper, what's going on in heaven, lower at the same time. Job didn't have that at his account. All he saw was what was happening on the lower stage. So we're going to be bouncing back and forth between these, and it's very critical that you understand that because everything is there. And so let's begin on the upper stage and kind of look at it. Here's another passage. It says, one day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. Take note of that. It might cause you a little trouble if you think about it. And Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? And Satan answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. And then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears and shuns evil. And Satan replies, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands so that the flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand, listen to this, stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. And if you know the story, Satan goes out, and that's exactly what he does. Every one of all those livestock that was listed, they were all killed. Every one of his servants, they were killed. Every one of his children were killed. His wealth, it evaporated. So here we have Job has absolutely nothing. Nothing. And then it goes on and says, at this, Job got up and he tore his robe, he shaved his head, and then he fell to the ground, look, screaming at God. No, that's not what it says. It says he fell to the ground in worship and said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. And all this, Job did not sin. He did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. I mean, I look at this, and here it says that Job bows in grief. But that grief he turns to praise. And it says he did not sin. He didn't give in to this. I mean, and listen, I just challenge you to think if you lost everything you have, what would you do? What would be the bowing words coming out of your mouth and looking at it? But listen, the story kind of switches back from earth now to the lower stage, back to the upper, and it says this. It says, then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil, and he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. Skin for skin, Satan replied. A man will give all he has for his own life, but now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life. And so from the rest of the story, the action's going to happen on the lower stage. But I want you to get it because this action that just took place on this upper stage, it can be quite confusing. You can start look at it and say, what in the world is going on? Because a lot of us think the real key question to life is what? Where is God in the midst of suffering? Right? We always think that. That's not the focus of this book. I've heard it taught so many times that Job's all about suffering. That's not what it's all about. Listen, the key question's found in chapter 1, verse 9, and it says, where it's talking, is does Job fear God for nothing? Does Job fear God for nothing? In other words, listen, God, the only reason that Job is devout and follows you is because there's a payout in the end. He's going to be blessed like nobody else. He's going to get all this stuff like nobody else. And listen, if he doesn't have that, he's not going to follow you. It's kind of like, listen, the reason that he worships you, it's kind of like the love the Cookie Monster has for the cookie jar. It doesn't work like that. That's not where this is going. If you turn off the faucet of blessing, is Job going to turn off the praise? Is he going to stop? Is he going to quit? And so God is really saying at the core of reality, the core of the universe, it's all about self-giving, self-sacrificial love, that this hope in a loving God, it's infinitely bigger than pain and suffering. This loving and giving. And so Job is now hit with this second wave of suffering. I mean, first of all, he lost everything, but now God releases Satan and he's able to attack his body. And it says that he's covered from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet with these nasty sores, these boils across his body. And where do we find him? We find him at the top of an ash heap, the town dump, if you will, and he's got a broken piece of pottery, and he's scraping at the boils on his. And folks, listen, you talk about pain and suffering. It's happening to Job right now. It's awful, and here he is. And what's the next thing in the story that happens? Listen, his wife comes up to him, right? The person that should be like your supporter and your curse, and she says, Job, why don't you just curse God and die? Now, ladies, let me just give you a little advice here. I'm pretty sure that when Mrs. Job said that to Job, it was not encouraging, right? It didn't build him up. It didn't have, no, I mean, listen, just curse God and die. And before we launch out too much hate toward Mrs. Job, which pretty much every sermon you've ever heard about her is awful and not good and bad. Listen, let me just remind you, she lost everything she had too. She lost every child she had too. She was now without anything, and now she had a husband that's disease-stricken with boils from head to toe, and she's going to have to care for him until the day he dies, and then she's going to be left with nothing. So she all she did was put voice to the very feelings that we've had when we go through pain and suffering. Anybody with me? I mean, that's all she did. And what did Job say to her? Did he listen to her voice, her advice, curse God and die? No. Listen what he said to his wife. He says, you're talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? Whew. That's heavy if you let that sink in. Shall we accept good from God but not trouble from God? I mean, listen, in chapter 1, we see Job. Man, I'm going to praise you, God. You know, blessed be the God. Listen, I love him. I praise him. But here we get a different feel that starts happening and do this. And I want you to understand, we're told at this point, after this second push of suffering into his life, it says this, Job 2:10, it says, in all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Chapter 1, you go back to it says, and Job did not sin, period. But here now it says, Job did not sin in what he said. I think what it's saying is Job is starting to have a difference on the inside, right? He's not feeling like praising God anymore, but he's saying the right things, right? Anybody with me on this? I mean, you start looking at it. He did not sin in what he said, but his heart was struggling. And then again, not only did his wife come up to him and say, curse God and die, but then his 3 best buddies show up, right? They show up, and look what they said. It says, when they saw Job from a distance, they could hardly recognize him, and they began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes, and they sprinkled dust on their heads. I mean, they had heard it was bad for Job, but they couldn't be prepared for what they saw. It didn't even look like their friend, right? He was so bad and so awful. It was there. And I don't know, can you just imagine being sick and your buddies show up? Usually that's a good thing, right? That's an awesome thing. But listen, your buddies show up and, oh, dang, dude, you look bad. Oh, my God, and they start crying because, oh, man, Job, I hope you're, oh. I mean, that wouldn't be very encouraging. They were so overtaken, they just began to weep. In fact, the scripture says this, chapter 2, verse 13, then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. I mean, they were so overtaken and sick about what they saw in their body. They just sat with him for 7 days. 7 days. And I mean, it had such an impact that the Jews took this as a practice of sitting with people for 7 days. In fact, this day Judaism will speak of sitting Shiva, literally sitting sevens. In other words, they have the practice to this day that when somebody's in mourning, that they will spend 7 days with them, grieving and agony. Listen, that's an awesome thing. Isn't that what Paul was kind of getting at when he talked about weeping with those that weep? mourning with those that mourn. That's exactly the practice. And here's the part I want to challenge you with, church. If you want to hear me, what do you do when you're facing pain and suffering? What do you do, more importantly, when other people are facing? Do we just try to fix them? Come on, you shouldn't be sad. You shouldn't be so down. Come on, be positive. Lift your head up. I mean, I'm just going to tell you, as Christians, sometimes we say the absolute stupidest thing to people when they're going through pain and suffering. Oh, you shouldn't do that. It's not right for you to question and doubt and have wrestle. Listen, it's nonsense, some of the things that we hit people, but at the end of the day, here's what I'm going to challenge you with. Is it okay for us to be a community where it's not okay? Y'all hear what I'm saying? I mean, or do I have to show up to the doors and walk in the front doors here? And I have to put it on, it's okay. I'm good. Folks, that's crap. This has got to be a place where it's okay to not be okay. Where I don't have to fake it. I don't have to look like I have it all together. Where everything is just hunky-dory. And at the end of the day, I think it's the biggest reason we should have life groups. Listen, we need to study the Bible, absolutely. But I'm going to tell you there's something about having a group of people that will surround you when life isn't okay. Right? When life isn't a bed of roses, when things are struggling, I need somebody that will just let me be, and maybe just sit with me for 7 days. Maybe just to understand me. And listen, it's there. And after 7 days, the scripture says that Job speaks. Remember in chapter 1, verse 21, Job said this before this. He said, God gives, God takes away, blessed be the name of the Lord. But not now. Not now. When Job finally speaks after sitting with friends for 7 days, chapter 3, verse 1, it says, after this, Job opened his mouth and he cursed the day of his birth. He cursed it. It's probably the reason why Job didn't have some big TV ministry, right? He wasn't the positive thinker. He wasn't the Tony Robbins of this is how good life is. No, he cursed the day of death. And I challenge you, read the next 28 chapters. From chapter 3 to chapter 31, Job gets so real and so full of this vitriolic hatred, bitterness, throwing accusations at God. And listen, you talk about real and authentic. Job got real and authentic, and it was here. And let me just share couple things that Job said. Job 6:2, Job says, the arrows of the Almighty are in me. In other words, God shot an arrow into me. My spirit drinks in their poison. God's terrors are marshaled against me. Job 19:6 says, God has wronged me and has drawn his net around me. I mean, how many of you have heard of the patience of Job? Right? I mean, people talk about the patience. Listen, not in this book. Read it. Read it. You don't find patience. You don't find anything. Here, what you find is Job making accusations and arguments against, and he talks about how awful God has been to him. He's full of anger and confusion and bringing, and he attacks God. But listen, he doesn't attack him as an unbeliever. He doesn't attack him as a skeptic, not even as an atheist. Listen, you know how he attacks him? As a believer, as a follower. I want you to understand this. He comes that way, and it's so real, and so much so that his friends, they can't handle it. Job, what are you saying? Don't talk like that. Don't say those things. How can you do that? And literally comes, and Job says in chapter 23, verse 3, he says, if only I knew where to find him, talking about God, if only I could go to his dwelling, I would state my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. Of course, nobody can see God, right? Nobody can do it, but Job was like, if I could find him, we'd have a fight. We'd fight man to man. We would get there. But listen, what's the word we say to people that when they're struggling? What do we tell them? Oh, just trust God. Just trust God. Not Job. Not Job. I'd fight. I'd have a case. Maybe stating our lack of trust is the way we can trust God. I don't know, but I just know when you look at this, that Job saying, man, I want a fight. And then chapter 38, this is when the uh-oh moment comes, right? God speaking here. It says, then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Say, uh-oh. Yeah, how would you like to be Job at that moment? Man, you stated, I want to fight. I drew my line. Let's have it. And then God spoke to Job out of the storm. Verse 2 says, this is God talking, who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? You talk like you know something, boy. Let me tell you something. Let me straighten it out. And then God goes on. He says, where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand who marked off its dimensions. I mean, surely you know, Job. Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? And what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? Listen, you look at this. If you read through the book, when God does appear, he doesn't seem to get him around to answering Job's question, does he? He doesn't answer it. And I think it's on purpose. I think it's very deliberate. He doesn't tell him what happened. He doesn't tell him what happened in the upper stage when here it was God and Satan was there. He doesn't tell him all of that stuff. He just asked Job a bunch of questions, of penetrating questions. Why does he do that? See, I think he does it because he understands that, listen, Job's story is our story. It's one that we have to understand and be able to get to. But part of what's happening is God's just trying to point out something to Job. For some of you, I have a feeling he's wanting to point it out today. Job, listen, you may want to pick a fight, but you need to understand you've got a finite mind. You've got limited understanding. I think he's wanting to communicate that to some of us today. You think you got it all figured out. You ain't got squat figured out. Where were you when I spoke this world into existence? You didn't know? You have limited understanding. You don't go. And then God says something that seems kind of strange. He said, who cuts a channel for torrents of rain and a path for the thunderstorm to water a land where no one lives, an uninhabited desert, to satisfy a desolate wasteland and make it sprout with grass? We may read that and run past it, but not in the ancient world. They wouldn't. Water was a precious commodity. You would never waste water. You would never divert it out into the desert. And listen, here we find where God says, I cut the path for the rain to go out to where nobody's going to see it. It's going to cause flowers to come up, and nobody else would see it. But I did it. Why? Because God is crazy good. He does things that is unbelievable, and he wants us to get that. And then he tells through Job the story about the ostrich. And you think, what is it telling this story for? Here's a bird that will flap its wings, and it can't ever fly, right? It'll lay a clutch of eggs, and listen, then it forgets where they are. It's just a horrible mother, right? Awful. And yet, and then God says, listen, but when you watch her take off and run, man, how beautiful it is. Listen, the horse and rider can't keep up with her, right? It's incredible. And in other words, it's God's way of saying, man, guys, I built her for speed. Why? Because everything needs a little pizzazz. That's who I am. I'm so good. I'm so gratuitous in the way I give, and I do things that you can't even fathom. But the purpose is that's why. But listen, she's the opposite of who Job was. You know, here this dumb bird can't fly, can't remember where its eggs are. And you remember how Job was? Man, he even offered sacrifices for his children just in case. Some of you are hovering over your kids the same way, right? But listen, God's wanting you to understand, I'm so good, I will send rain out into the desert just so there can be a beautiful bloom. Right? Awesome. I will show my goodness in ways you can't fathom. But listen, the ostrich doesn't even know where the kids are. But God says, man, I'm so good. I love you. I do things you can't even put your mind around and do it. And so all that is God's doing these different things. And he talks about, I don't have time to chase them all. He talks about the behemoth. Many people think what is the hippo today. Some it'll talk about the wild ox. Animals that seemingly have no purpose. And it's God saying, listen, I want you to see I made them. I made them silly and strange looking and weird. Why? Because I'm good. And I'm giving, and I care. And it's important you see this, because when we get that, because God just gives for no reason at all. Why? It's his nature. It's who he is. He's crazy good. He's crazy loving. He does more than we could ever imagine. And listen, Job's story is our story. And so on this not so okay earth that we live on, where life isn't okay, where life is a struggle and it's often hard to deal with, we don't get to see that stage in heaven. We're just like Job. We don't get to see it. We don't get to hear. But I want you to understand, through the struggle, this is the part I want you to hear, because some of you are in the land of Uz right now. Through the struggle, Job got to see who God was. He got to see him through the pain and suffering. And listen, Job said in chapter 42, verse 5, he says, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. I got a deeper look at what God's really like. You know, he found out that, listen, that's enough. God, you're enough. All the struggle, the goodness of God, the givingness of God. God, you're enough. You're all I need. Some of you here are right now, you're wanting to give up because of what you're facing and what you're dealing with. And I can tell you, no, embrace the struggle. Embrace the struggle. And in the struggle, find out how giving and good God is. But listen, it doesn't matter what you face, God's enough. He's enough. You know, Satan will lie to you over and over again. Listen, you can't handle it. Yes, you can. God's enough. I mean, he's all you need. He's all that you have to do. And I'm going to tell you, the book of Job ends with this little epilogue, and I want you to see it, Job 42:7. And here, God is talking to Job's buddies now, right? He's talking to his friends, and God talking, says, I am angry with you. Now listen to this, because you have spoken of me what is not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. If you were one of his three friends, what would you be doing right now? What? Are you, God, Job was the one attacking you, questioning you, doubting you. We defended you. Right? We were the one that stood up for you. And God says, no, I'm angry with you. I'm angry with you. In fact, you talk about crazy. Here, three guys, every indication they were defending God. And God says, you were wrong. In fact, you have to go and get Job to pray for you so that you will be forgiven. You imagine the conversation between friends? Job, God says I have to get you to pray for me so I can be forgiven. I mean, would you be wanting to do it? And Job prays for them, and that's what happens. And folks, it's an amazing thing. It had to be really, really interesting. This is a weird book. It's strange how it unfolds. And then I want you to see what happened to Job at the end of his life. See, we often think about the right now, but look at the end of it. This is chapter 42, 12 through 15. It says, the Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. And he also, look at this, he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. The first daughter was named Gemini, and the second Keziah, and the third Karen-Hapuk. And nowhere in all the land were found women as beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father granted them an inheritance along with their brothers. Now, this seems a little bit strange, but I'm going to tell you, if you go through Hebrew genealogies, this was listed really strangely. You would always list your son's names, not in this passage. Only his sisters, only the sisters. And they weren't even typical names. Typically in Hebrew, you had a name that stood for some strong character or some deep theological belief, but not so with these three daughters of Job. They were names that had to do with beauty, and with that they were kind of strange, and they were listed that they had an inheritance. Now you say, okay. Well, no, that was really bizarre. In this time, you only gave an inheritance to your sons. Why? Because when your daughters would go off to be married, they'd go to another family, and if you gave an inheritance to your daughters, that would be like wasting money because that would go to the family of the in-laws, right? It was kind of like your 401k thing, but he gave an inheritance to the girls. In fact, their names, I want you just to see the Gemini, it meant dove. In other words, just a really, really beautiful bird and thing. The Kezia, it's a Hebrew word for cinnamon or for a prized spice. I mean, listen, anybody here ever been to Cinnabon? Come on, somebody has. I mean, this is almost like definite proof in the existence of God, right? I mean, you look, but a prized spice, and then Karen Hapuk, it means horn of shadow. And so Job named his daughters kind of after makeup. It'd be kind of like naming your daughter Maybelline or something like that. I mean, it was after that. But not only that, he gave them an inheritance. I mean, he gave them a name that said it's all about beauty. He says, listen, I'm giving you an inheritance and pouring it out upon you. And so why in the world does Job include this? What is Job doing it? Because Job now delights in giving what is not deserved. Maybe like God was. He learned to be outlandish and free in how he gave. Folks, I'm here to tell you that's what Almighty God does in our life once we've gone through pain and suffering. If we'll allow it to accomplish, he changes our heart. He changes our outlook. And now here we find Job. That's precisely where he is. Now Job gives for no reason at all. He cares even where he doesn't have to. He has become, if you will, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. And if you fast forward a couple 100 years and we come to another guy, right? He's a son of Job, if you will. And when you think about him, he would talk about God. And listen, when he talked about him, he talked an awful lot like Job talked after he'd gone through pain and suffering. He would say stuff like, consider the lilies of the field. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you that Solomon in all his glory, all of his work, all of his wealth, was not dressed like one of these little flowers of the field that nobody sees, that's here today and gone tomorrow. Listen, why in the world would God bless the lilies of the field? Because we have a heavenly Father that loves them, right? He delights in them, and so he puts them in a world where nobody's ever going to see them. Why? Because God's that good. He's that amazing. Folks, I just want you to see it. That, listen, when pain, when suffering, when struggle happens, and it's not if, it's when. Every one of us is going to go through the land of Uz. Every one of us, if you're not right now. But listen, you can let it accomplish something that we can become more like our Father, and we can just be crazy, just giving and loving and good. Everybody with me on this? Church, it really is a big deal how we embrace the pain and the suffering that comes our way. But listen, we need to remember, God is unbelievably good.